If you're considering buying a Powerwall 3 in 2026, you might be thinking, what's new? How much does it cost? And is it actually worth buying? Well, you've joined me here today at Tesla in Manchester, where they've given me behind the scenes access to their installer van. Now, usually this would be used to train installers, but today I'm going to be training you. Let's go. So, Powerwall 3, that's this bad boy next to me that's here. It's an all-in-one unit. And what I mean by that is the battery pack is at the bottom and the inverter is at the top. So unlike a traditional solar and battery storage system where you essentially have inverter and batteries either nearby or somewhere else and it looks a bit like a refrigerator unit, this kit is essentially all built into this one sleek looking bit of kit. The battery storage element to this is a fixed 13.5 kilowatt hour battery storage system. The inverter size is anything up to 11.04 kilowatts worth of discharge rate, which for a single phase property is essentially about the biggest inverter that you can physically fit. There's not much more we can actually pull down or push up the supply. Charge rates on this are also really impressive too. 5 kilowatt charge rate into the battery storage. This means that 13.5 kilowatt hour battery can essentially fill itself in around about 2.5 hours. If you're on one of those time of use tariffs like Octopus Cozy, for example, you can suck the energy in when it's really cheap from the national grid. And then when you're during peak times, you can get the energy out of the battery storage through the inverter, delivered into the home really quickly because it can deplete the battery in a little over an hour. Powerwall 3 can actually be set up as battery storage only, so it can work without solar panels. It can also work obviously with solar panels as well. It can do both. This is great for those people that are maybe doing a building project, are ready for the battery storage, are ready for the gateway, but might not be quite ready for the solar panels yet, or if you're doing your project in phases. Now, I'm going to come on to this a little bit later on, but when the Powerwall 3 is coupled with expansion packs, and I'll explain what an expansion pack is later on, the charge rate goes from 5 kilowatt to 8 kilowatt. So if you've now got a Powerwall 3 and an expansion pack, 27 kilowatt hours worth of battery storage, we can fill that in a little under 4 hours. So effectively on these off-peak windows, we can make the most of it. So what about this inverter that's built into the top? So we've talked about the charge and discharge rates, but it actually has the solar inverter built in. Unlike ordinary inverters that typically have only 2 maximum power point trackers, this is the inputs we use for solar panels, the Powerwall 3 in the UK has 3. Now, if you're watching from over the pond, you might have a version that has 6. So for the UK-based version, we get 3 maximum power point trackers. The voltage on these power point trackers is 60 all the way up to 480 volts. Now, you might be thinking, what on earth is that? Well, that means for you at home, if you're thinking of having a Powerwall 3, each one of these inputs can have anywhere from 2 panels to 15 panels. So effectively, up to 20 kilowatt peak worth of solar can be inputted onto the side of the Powerwall 3. About 45 solar panels, depending on your solar panel size and the manufacturer behind those panels that you're having installed. Now, the 2 panels, the 60 volts, is particularly interesting because what often you'll find is, if for example, you're a semi-detached property, you might have 3 roofs, an east-facing that's nice and big, a west-facing that's nice and big, but actually maybe a south-facing roof that you can only put 2 or 3 solar panels on. Well, that's where this really comes into gear because we don't need at this point in time microinverters or optimizers or any other expensive parts. We can simply just take a cable to the side of the Powerwall 3 and, well, it will work. You can make the most of 3 roofs. What if you need even more than 45 solar panels? Now, for the mass majority of people, that's going to be more than sufficient, particularly for a single phase installation. However, it's technically possible to have up to 4 main Powerwalls on one single system, and they're paralleled. So what this means is they all talk and communicate with each other, and they can all charge and discharge. but that's subject to the limits of your incoming supply cable, of course, which will probably come first, because there is ultimately a limit to how much power we can pull down a cable and how much we can also do in reverse and send out to the national grid. But on a theoretical basis, well, you're going to run out of supply cable ability before you run out of ability with the Powerwall 3. And in addition to that, if that's not enough, on the main leading Powerwall 3, you can have up to 3 expansion packs. But as I've said, more on expansion packs in a sec. So another thing to note about charge rates into the battery storage, and this is quite unique to the Powerwall 3, is say I've now got 20 kilowatts worth of solar and that's actually generating on the roof. Well, there are limitations to what the system can actually make the most of. But unlike most systems that can only make the most of the maximum capacity of the inverter, the Powerwall 3 can essentially take 5 kilowatts and store that into the battery storage, so a charge rate of 5 kilowatt, but can simultaneously discharge up to 11 out to the property. So you can essentially make the most of up to 16 kilowatt peak worth of solar generation, charging and discharging at the same time. Another interesting thing about the Powerwall 3 is not only do you have these 3 inputs, but it can also track other sources of generation. And that's not just limited to other solar inverters that are on site. Let's say you've got a feed-in tariff system or another solar system effectively on site, and you're thinking, I want to couple this with battery storage, but I don't want to interfere with that solar system because I've got a warranty on it, for example. Well, the Powerwall 3 can not only have its own solar input, but it can also simultaneously track what another source of generation is doing, whether it be a solar system, hydroelectric, whether it be a wind turbine like we've set up, couple them together within your Powerwall app. And these specs get a little bit better with the DC expansion pack. If we add a DC expansion pack onto a main Powerwall 3, remember it can only be on the leading Powerwall 3 currently, and we can have up to 3 expansion packs on this system. Each expansion pack is an additional 13.5 kilowatt hours worth of storage. And the expansion packs are a fraction of the price of the main Powerwall 3 themselves. So if you need to expand just some extra battery storage, you've not got to buy a full leading Powerwall in order to be able to do so. This also improves the performance specs. Without solar, the Powerwall 3 and a DC expansion pack can charge at the rate of 8 kilowatt. When we couple the system with solar panels, we can not only charge the battery storage at 8 kilowatts, but simultaneously at the same time, we can discharge up to 11 kilowatts out to the property or out to the national grid, subject to export limits. But we could, in theory, be making the most of up to 19 kilowatt worth of the 20 kilowatts worth of solar. Most manufacturers at this point in time, they'll allow you to oversize the inverter, but they physically can't make the most of the actual generation. The inverter often will just throttle that generation down, but providing you've got the right setup with a Powerwall 3, it can actually make the most of it. So the expansion packs are really good insofar as they can either go behind the main Powerwall 3 unit. When we don't have a glass front, it's marginally cheaper to be able to install the expansion pack because we effectively don't need this little part that's at the front because it goes behind. If you're having it behind, the one thing to note is the Powerwall 3 has to be mounted on the ground. If you don't want it to go behind, because let's say you've got a narrow ginnel alley, depending on where you are in the UK, you can also go to either side of the Powerwall 3. They actually have a DC expansion port here and also on the other side as well. So depending on where we've mounted the main Powerwall 3, we can either go to the left or the right. Lead lengths are a set length, so we can either get 0.5 meters away, 2 meters, or 4 meters. When we're coupling multiple expansion packs, it's really important that you speak to your installer, as there are sometimes limitations to the length of leads that we can couple when we're adding multiple onto the same system. Lead length as well will also slightly affect the cost. I'm going to be going into detail regarding pricing of a Powerwall 3, house backup, which I've not yet discussed, a little bit later on in the video. So with one Powerwall 3, that's 13.5 kilowatt hours. When we add an expansion pack, that's 27 kilowatt hours. If we add up to 3 expansion packs on one leading Powerwall, that's 54 kilowatt hours. But the theoretical maximum, as I mentioned earlier, is 4 leading Powerwalls and off the leading Powerwall 3 expansion packs, which would be a theoretical maximum of 94.5 kilowatt hours on a single phase system. Now, there's always limitations to this stuff, in that there's limitations to how much power we can draw in from the grid at a point of time to make the most of the battery storage, because some of these off-peak windows, you often only have 6 hours. And if we're limited to, say, a charge rate of 8 kilowatts, then we'll actually be limited in terms of how much we can charge at that point in time into the battery storage. For the UK, and this is UK specific, our wiring regulations, BS 7671, we're due to have an amendment later on this year, is set to limit the amount of battery storage we can have in domestic houses. From my understanding, this will be about 40 kilowatt hours internally in the property, or if the battery storage is mounted externally, we could potentially have up to 80 kilowatt hours of battery storage in a domestic property. There are also going to be limits in terms of square meterage of the actual property as well, and how that interlinks. As it presently stands as of today, we can absolutely install all of that battery storage, but what's quite likely to happen as we move forward towards the back end of 2026, there's going to be regulations that essentially advise us as installers of where we shouldn't be mounting battery storage, and in what capacity sense we can mount and where. So there'll be a little bit of an on-site assessment. This is also another important point to make, is whenever you're thinking of having this kit, if you're thinking of spending all that money on something like a Powerwall 3, you almost always want to be getting the installer out to have a good look around your property, to be measuring up, to be discussing the cable routes with you. Because let's face it, it's nice to have a piece of kit like this, but the last thing you want is a poor installation where someone's just remote quoting it and not really given a great deal of consideration, in my opinion, to how it's actually installed. And I think this will become more prudent as time goes on and these regulations come into place. So I often get asked, can the Powerwall 3 go outside? And the answer to that is absolutely. So the Powerwall 3 is IP67 rated. What does that mean to you? For the first, I think it's the 2 foot 60 centimeters, it's completely submersible. There's even an interesting video that Tesla have done where they show it plonked in a fish tank and the house continues to run. So if your place is actually prone to a bit of flooding, honestly, don't worry. And then the top part, I think it's jet wash proof. It's also protected against the ingress of dust as well, subject to how your installer installs the side glands, of course. Now for the gateway here, that's IP55, so you don't want to be putting that in an area where it would be subject to flooding, but essentially the gateway can also go outside as well. In fact, all of the Tesla kit that you see there, including the isolators if they're IP rated, they can all go outside. I've done a lot of talking about the Powerwall 3 that's here, but this next to it is what's called the gateway. Now, traditionally, when I'd first done the first video on Powerwall 3, you had to have the installation with a gateway. However, one of the revisions that they did to the Powerwall 3, you can now install a Powerwall 3 without a gateway. What does a gateway do? What is it? How does it work? So the role of the gateway is essentially there for house backup. This is where, in the event that the power cuts off to your home, if you have a gateway, so long as there's still power in the battery storage system, or so long as you have solar panels that are generating energy, your Powerwall 3 can essentially stay off grid. That could be if there was enough sunshine and the power was off for long enough, in theory, in perpetuity. In practical senses, this is really there for those short-term power losses in a house where the power's off for a couple of hours, and instead of it being really annoying, you can use the power from your Powerwall 3 to deliver it into your home. However, there are some people I know from my house, for example, where I don't think I've ever actually had a power cut. So I'd be going, well, the gateway is probably about £1,000 fully installed, depending on where you are in the UK. Well, if you don't need one and it's never going to be of much use to you, I mean, you can actually retrospectively fit these. So let's say you don't have one at the outset, you can always add one later. There's essentially a saving of about £1,000 in place, and it doesn't affect the overall performance of the Powerwall 3 itself. Instead, I don't know if we can quite see it up here, but there's a little device that can track what your incoming supply to your house is doing and feed this to the information on the top of the Powerwall 3. And that's how the Powerwall 3 makes its decisions. So as you turn the kettle on, power can be drawn up from the battery without drawing it from the grid. So you can essentially be reliant upon the Powerwall 3 without the need for the gateway. But for those people that are prone to power cuts or that really like the idea of energy independence and resilience from the grid, then at that point in time, you would often couple it alongside the Powerwall 3. I'd probably say 70 to 80% of the installations we do, most people go, while I'm at it, whilst I'm doing it, they'd normally add on the gateway. So another great feature of the house backup system is Stormwatch. Now this is essentially where the Powerwall 3 monitors the Met Office data for weather conditions. If we go off grid, the last thing we want is only 20% in the battery storage. So if we get a yellow or a red weather warning, the Powerwall 3, if it's toggled on within your mobile phone app, will essentially look at this information, force charge the battery up to 100%, and in the event you go off grid, you can stay off grid for much longer in the process. That leads me quite nicely onto the minimum temperature levels for a Powerwall 3. A Powerwall 3 can go all the way down to -20, despite it being a lithium iron phosphate battery. And it does this through individual cell level heating. So effectively, the Powerwall 3 will work out at what point you need this power and at what point during the day. So it'll say, right, we wake up at 7 o'clock in the morning, and it's intelligent enough to be able to work out, right, we now need to preheat the battery storage up ready or keep it above the minimum -20 temperature and be ready to meet your house demands at that point in time. So one of the things I thought might be quite nice before I come on to software, before I come on to pricing is, most installers won't actually give you a walkthrough of what these parts are. So I've already kind of introduced the Powerwall 3. In the top right-hand corner, we have the DC inputs. So this is where our solar cables would come down from our roof. Our AC inputs are here. We have our inverter in the top, and we have our battery storage that's down the bottom. Now, in order to be able to safely isolate this kit, the Powerwall actually has its own onboard isolators. And normally for ourselves as engineers, because say we did have a problem with the Powerwall 3 or we need to access it for maintenance in any way, we have the DC isolator, which would be relevant if you had solar panels. Now, if you've got multiple strings of solar panels, you may well have seen more than one of these on an installation. We've then got our AC isolator that's up here that essentially isolates the actual Powerwall 3. Now, if you're having Powerwall 3 without gateway, you'll also then have a little mini mains board that will be up the top. Now, circuit breakers will be subject to your actual individual installation, but effectively you'll have a little fuse board. This could also be in the existing fuse board if you're home, if it's up to current standards, but that will essentially supply power to the Powerwall 3. Or if you have a gateway, I'm gonna let you behind the scenes here, if we can get this thing open. We essentially have what is a fuse board built into the bottom alongside here. So we can feed our Powerwall 3 from the gateway. So often, what does this mean for you? You don't actually need to go and buy a little fuse board. We can put it all down the side of your house. It can be IP rated, as we mentioned earlier on, for both the gateway and the Powerwall without the need of the extra fuse board that's alongside here. If you don't have a gateway, then sometimes if you do have a gateway, you might need one of these. It's called a remote meter. Now, for those beady-eyed people out there that understand a little bit about Powerwall 3, you might be thinking, I've not got one of these. This is a part that's very specific for installations in relation to the Republic of Ireland to isolate solar panels. I just wanted to put a note on there. If you're thinking, I've not got one of them, should I be worried? You really don't need to be. Another couple of things to note is, this is what a single phase supply looks like that's down here. So if you have 3 of these, that would normally be a 3-phase supply. We've got our actual energy meter. You'll notice most people actually have a smart meter, and this incoming isolator here is actually specific again for that Republic of Ireland installation. And most people don't realise that the Powerwall 3 will often have what's called an earth rod. So this couples alongside your existing earthing arrangement. Most of the time we rely upon our connection from the national grid, but let's say we go off grid, we may no longer have that connection to the national grid. If you go for a gateway, you'd have a little copper rod that goes in the ground, and that essentially couples alongside the existing earth arrangement. So that's what that little green box is down there. So obviously there's a lot of parts and components that I've walked you through there. The one thing I would ask you to take away from this, if you're having a quote, no matter where you are in the world, if you're watching this, I would always be asking your installer to break down the parts and components that are included. I'm sure you'll appreciate that we want to know whether it comes with a gateway, whether it doesn't, whether you actually need one of the remote meters or not. Do we need fuse boards? Do we need distribution? The problem with like pre-done, here's a guideline quote is often it might not come with the little ancillary parts that you need, and that kind of makes up the entirety of the package and your final price. So one of the things we don't have on display here, and probably one of the most important things, is actually the mobile phone app. And that's one area that Tesla absolutely excel in. It's so mature, it's just so intuitive, I think is the right word to use there. You can set up time of use tariffs. You can tell the Powerwall when your off-peak windows are. In fact, you can do off-peak, mid-peak, peak and super peak, I think, are the 4 different bands of tariffs that you can have, but you can essentially set different times of year that you might have different pricing as well. And the Powerwall 3 will look at your daily usage, look at the weather outside, predict how much solar you're going to generate, how much it will have in the battery storage at that point of time, and dynamically purchase the right amount of energy at the right times for your home. So let's say Monday through till Friday, I'm at work, and on a Saturday, Sunday, I'm at home. We could have an identical amount of solar generation, but the consumption in the house is going to be completely different, isn't it? So the Powerwall can effectively look at your off-peak price and make a decision in terms of when it's best to buy the right amount of energy. During the week, it might buy not so much, making the most of solar. And on a weekend, it goes, actually, it's going to be really heavy consumption. We might be in for breakfast, lunch, and tea. So it'll make a decision on how much power to buy the night before. And this also gets taken up a notch now with intelligent tariffs. And again, this will vary depending on the country you're in. But in the UK, we essentially have a tariff called Intelligent Octopus Flux. So what your Powerwall 3 can do is dynamically look at active grid pricing, both import and export prices, and can make a decision on the best time of day in half-an-hour increments of when to buy it. So let's say the price is really cheap in the middle of the day and overnight, it's going to buy then. And let's say it's really expensive at tea time and you don't need the power. The Powerwall can essentially discharge that energy out to the national grid and cream you a profit off the back of it. I can't tell you how intelligent it is, and yet how simple and straightforward the mobile phone app is to actually work and operate with. Tesla have also opened what they call their API. This essentially enables third-party softwares to be able to control certain aspects of your Powerwall. So for some of those people with smart home systems, in addition to all the other aspects I've mentioned, you can actually take local control of your Powerwall with certain limitations associated with it. But let's say you have your own tariff that's not intelligent and you want to yet feed information to the Powerwall with stuff like the Net Zero app that's available here in the UK, you can do so. One of the things to note about the Powerwall's mobile phone settings is its ability to be able to charge to 100% overnight. The idea behind the Powerwall 3 is it's just going to do it for you. It's a very hands-off piece of technology. But there are some people out there that go, hang on, wait a second, my overnight off-peak rate is much cheaper than my export rate, so I want to force charge my battery to 100% every single night. Internally inside the Powerwall app, you can't do that. You have to use a third-party software to control the API in order to be able to access that level of granular control. It can be done, it's all just about simple setup effectively. Now this isn't a flaw, this is by design, and I really don't think that's a bad thing. Personally, I'm at work all day. I don't have the time to be individually controlling each setting like some inverters and battery storage do, where you have to go on day after day and amend the settings depending upon the weather outside. The idea, the Powerwall has got your back, it's designed to do it. But I was just simply making that aware for those people that quite like that granular control. It can be done. Warranties. That's something that comes up time and time again. I think, look, if you're thinking of investing thousands of pounds in a piece of kit, you kind of want to know the warranty that goes behind it. With the Powerwall 3 and expansion packs, you get a 10-year warranty with unlimited cycles. If you're forcibly dumping power out to the grid, something to note is Tesla Energy do sometimes put fair usage limitations and energy retention rates on the warranty, but for the mass majority of people, it will just simply be 10-year unlimited cycles, and we don't really need to think about it a great deal. The Gateway 2 is also a 10-year warranty. In the event that the worst should actually happen with either the Powerwall 3 or the Gateway, and let's say one fails, I've actually had some experience of this, although very limited. And bear in mind, we've done hundreds of these systems as premium installers. installers, Tesla are very good. Not only are they very good in terms of an aftercare basis, so like from my experience, we would call the Tesla contact center, they pretty much diagnose things within 24, 48 hours. The majority of the time, whenever we've had something, it's normally software based, if I'm honest, so they'll push a software update to the unit and problem solved. But where we have had, and I've had a single Powerwall 3 actually fail on us effectively, it was where the DC inputs on the left-hand side of them just didn't work for whatever reason. Tesla diagnosed the problem really quickly whilst we were on site. It's rapid. And from ourselves as installers, where they really differentiate themselves versus other manufacturers will cover your parts. It's a 10-year parts warranty. But for you guys, you know, if you've only got a 5-year insurance-backed workmanship warranty, which I would always recommend you get, if you're at year 7 and this goes wrong, you're a bit like, well, who covers the labour aspect? Because that can be a significant proportion of having a repair done. Well, Tesla actually fund us as installers. So if something goes wrong, and providing it's not installer error and it's a genuine fault with the manufacturer, Tesla actually cover the cost of the replacement unit and ourselves as installers, subject to some limitations, of course, but effectively, for you that might want a Powerwall 3, I think you can sit there safe in the knowledge that for the full 10 years, you're not going to be hit by a cycle limitation, not also going to be slapped with an actual labour cost associated with repairing it, providing you use a proper installer to get the kit done. So from a warranty point of view, and just take this as a bit of a word of warning, double check that not only the installer that you're thinking of going with is registered with Tesla, but also any subcontractors have been appropriately trained by Tesla as well. Something I've come across recently a couple of times is where a subcontractor has taken on the installation of a Powerwall 3, and Tesla are quite specific about their training. It's really important that that person installing it has undergone their training. If not, they won't cover your warranty. And it's really hard for installer like us, where someone has done that, in that there's no kind of get out of jail free card. You'll be stuck with a Powerwall 3 and a Powerwall 3 without a warranty. So take the time to have a check to make sure not only is the installer MCS registered for battery storage specifically, there are 2 different separate registrations, but also your installer themselves, the person installing, not the person just selling it, are actually registered with Tesla to be able to install the Powerwall 3. And another thing to note with the Tesla Aftercare is their ability to be able to listen to ourselves as installers and end users. So I mentioned the integration they've recently done for smart tariffs, and I think that that's really cool. Like, calibration used to happen at any time during the day. The Powerwall would randomly pick a point in the day and do it. But for some customers, this was causing frustration because they have a peak rate, and sometimes the Powerwall would decide to start calibrating at tea time when the energy was expensive. In the Tesla app now, you can actually pick a time when you want this calibration to take place. So it can essentially charge and discharge and update itself overnight in an off-peak window when it's more appropriate for it to do so, or when it's less risky from a grid outage point of view. You can do this when it's most cost effective for you. So on the note of innovation as well, like, bear in mind, this is the Powerwall 3 can essentially work with a single phase system. It can actually track, the gateway can track what a 3-phase system is doing, but the Powerwall 3 itself can only meet the demand of a single phase. So traditionally, where we wanted to meet the demand of a 3-phase system, we would have to install 3 Powerwall 3s. But there's a new Powerwall coming out called the Tesla 3P. So for those people with a 3-phase system, I can't say much more than that, but don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'm going to be coming out with more information as I've got it. As soon as a 3P is available, I'm going to do my best to be one of the first people that film it. So from a pricing point of view, what does all this kit cost? What are the different setups and what are the likely cost implications of it? So for a Powerwall 3 itself, without house backup, I would say a typical price point for this would be about 6.5 grand. Now, this is a bit subjective depending upon where you are inside of the UK, and will also vary by country as well. If you're having the Powerwall 3 with a gateway, typically speaking again, the gateway is about £1,000 as an additional extra. So about 7.5 grand. Now, it could be a little bit more if your cable runs really long, so take that one with a pinch of salt there. The other one's the expansion pack. Now, depends on the lead and depends on whether you need one of the glass fronts. For an expansion pack that goes behind the main leader, expansion prices have come down ever so slightly recently. You're looking about 4,700 quid. Where they're going to the side, they might be a little bit more because you need a glass front. And again, where we've got much longer leads, like the 4-meter lead, you might be expecting that to be nudging towards the 5 grand mark in terms of installation. but expansion packs are significantly less by way of price than buying another Powerwall 3. Something to note on pricing: be careful and be really careful about the type of grid application your installer is planning on doing. Some installers will install the Powerwall 3 under what's called G98. This restricts the Powerwall to a charge rate of 3.68 kilowatt, a discharge rate to your home of 3.68 kilowatt, a discharge rate to the national grid of 3.68 kilowatt, and they'll give you a lower price alongside it because it's easier for them to do the application. Just make sure you're doing a full-blown G99 application so you make the most of any charge, discharge rates, and ultimately you can export as most as the grid will reasonably allow you to do so out to the national grid. That sometimes may well be where you find a cheap price, but cheap doesn't always mean you're getting the full capability of the Powerwall 3. So how does this compare on the market to other brands? Well, the only thing that I think is even remotely comparable would be like the SigEnergy side install, but the Powerwall 3 is an all-in-one unit. The SigEnergy side install is stackable. The SigEnergy system is there essentially for, like, as it presently stands, for 3-phase versions, although as I mentioned, the 3P's coming in. So I've not got the technical specs, so I can't tell you how that compares yet. It positions itself very differently is what I would say. Your SigEnergy side install is very much like mid-range kit. It's there suitable for the mass majority of homes. It's very flexible. The Powerwall 3, in my opinion, is kind of mid-range to high-performance households. Those households that have got heat pumps, we've got saunas in the home, we've got air conditioning, we've got high consumption, typically speaking over about 4,000 kilowatt hours or more per year. And we just need that extra little bit of oomph in the inverter. We need that little bit more storage on the go. And actually this is where the Powerwall perfectly positions itself. It's also, like, I would say, the maturest product that's simply out on the market. Tesla are a long-standing company that have been doing it for a long time. They're one of the early adopters of this technology. So we had the Powerwall 1, we had the Powerwall 2 and the Powerwall 3. And for some of those people that have a Powerwall 2, they might be thinking, I've been left in the lurch a little bit. I can't get hold of that additional battery storage that I essentially want to have. Well, let me tell you something. For the back end of 2026, Tesla are bringing in backwards compatibility. So you can't buy another Powerwall 2, but one thing you will be able to do with the Powerwall 3 is be able to make them backwards compatible with Powerwall 2. This will be done via software. So this is where your Powerwall 2 and your Powerwall 3 will essentially be able to communicate with each other within the same ecosystem. Tesla's actually considering the existing customer base as well, which is something I really like about the brand. And effectively, the Powerwall 2 and Powerwall 3 will be intercompatible. Coming onto it as well, aesthetics. I don't know about you, and it's each to their own, but I think it's absolutely banging. I'm not going to say that. Wow. I think they look really nice. Like, traditionally, battery storage is some like clunky inverter and wires that go absolutely everywhere and some like refrigeration box that sits on the floor. And the one thing that I really like about Tesla is the fact that they're simple, they're refined, they're elegant, they look really nice. And when you put the expansion pack behind, it just doesn't look clunky. They've really thought of it, not only from an installer's perspective, but when you're driving on your drive at the end of the night, or when you're looking in your garage, it looks really nice. It's a little bit fancy, if anything, but not really with the fancy price point. The price point on these has come down over time, and for what you get, value for money is absolutely outstanding. Well, that's all from me. I really hope you've enjoyed the video that we've put together today. I say, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.